later on. So if you're not comfortable with that, please just turn off your cameras so that you're not in the video. But we've got lots to talk about, so I'll hand you straight over to Evan Easton-Calabria.
Great. Hello, everyone. Wonderful to be with you. My name is Evan. I'm a senior researcher at the Feinstein International Center at Tufts University, and I'm working on a project called the Academic Alliance for Anticipatory Action. So very fitting for our conversation today. And I've actually been working at the Refugee Studies Centre at the University of Oxford for the last 5 years and just transitioned into this position. So this kind of conversation, I suppose, as what we're having kind of comes as a way to merge different tracks that I would say are, equally pressing in terms of the ongoing climate crisis and the increase in extreme weather events that we're obviously all very, very aware of, and rising global displacement. So we have a lot of numbers and a lot of realities, I suppose, and there's actually not a lot being discussed or being written at the moment and researched around the intersection of refugees and displaced people and anticipatory action. So that's the impetus for this conversation. And today we have a wonderful panel. I think I should call them conversationalists, I suppose, who we're going to be talking with and really sharing some different perspectives. We'll have, I don't know, more of a focus, a bit of a case study on Bangladesh, because there's some really, really interesting work happening there and obviously high levels of need as well. And I really welcome you to make use of the chat function. And I may occasionally, only hopefully with advance permission, kind of call on people if they want to share more. We'll have a lot of time for Q&A as well. So by all means, please share kind of where you see your intersection or interest coming in. And as part of that, if you want to, write who you are and where you're based in the chat, that would be wonderful, just so we have a sense of that. And I'll kind of kick us off. So we thought we would start our conversation by a little bit of context setting, and I'm going to have the panelists introduce themselves as they speak. So I'd like to turn it over to Susan now, who's currently actually a colleague of mine because I'm getting to be a visiting fellow at the institute that she works at. And Susan, could you kind of kick us off and just share more about what you see from your vantage point as a researcher of the challenges that, forcibly displaced people are facing in relation to climate change, extreme weather events, and other kind of issues that you've come up against in your research?
Thank you very much, Evan, and it's good to be here to engage in this conversation this afternoon or morning, wherever you are. So my name is Susan Ekoh. I work as a researcher at the German Institute of Development and Sustainability, and there I support a project called Contested Mobility, and there we're currently working on research in West Africa, looking at the localization of global agreements, such as the Global Compacts for Migration and Refugees, but also the Paris Agreement. So I look at the intersection between climate change and migration. I've conducted research in the US, Lagos, and now in Ghana and Senegal. And so today, I just want to start off, as a researcher, I want to draw attention to the importance of data and research. So when we talk about the needs of displaced people, there's no one size fits all. So every displaced person is not going to need the same thing. A displaced person in a certain place is not going to have the same needs as another displaced person or refugee in another place. And so that's why it's important to understand the local context. So sometimes we just make an intervention and then we expect that we get the same successful results, but that's not always the case. So in my research in Lagos, for example, looking at flooding, for example, as a hazard that drives people or could drive people to move. So my research question was basically trying to understand people's perceptions of risk. So the first thing is, okay, how do people even see this risk? Because that's different across the board. At the same time, how do people define what their needs are? And so, for example, one thing that I found was that people were very particular about having control on where they would move to. So what does relocation look like for them? if they're displaced and they have to move somewhere else, like what does that look like for them? They want to be able to be part of that process. So you don't just come in as an external actor and say, oh yeah, you know, you need to move, or now that you're displaced, this is what is going to happen to you. You have to engage with people. You need to be able to get people on board. So bottom-up approaches are more successful than just coming in and saying this is what needs to be done. So you're able to define what these needs are through research, through data, and how are you collecting that data? That's another important angle. Are you engaging these communities? There are existing structures that can be leveraged on to be able to understand these things rather than coming in and defining what community needs are. So that's what I'll start with, and we can proceed.
Thank you. Words after my own heart. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Sazzad, can I turn to you to share more, maybe in reflection to what Susan shared and otherwise in relation to your work in Bangladesh, and also make sure to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Evans, for having me here in this amazing forum, where I think it's very valuable that we talk about refugees, which are often basically left out in terms of wider disaster risk management platform. So I am based in Cox's Bazar, working with the IFRC American Red Cross program coordinator. We are basically implementing here a disaster risk management program for the refugee people in Cox's Bazar, and also the adjacent host community or Bangladeshi community here in Cox's Bazar. So Cox's Bazar is a southeast part of the country, which is prone to cyclone hazards, then also landslide, flash floods as well, because it's a hilly area in the part. Welcoming refugee for Cox's Bazar is not a new thing. It has started in 1978, and then basically in 1991 and 2, it has received more than 250,000 refugees from Myanmar. And it was going on since 1992, and the biggest influx that we experienced is in 2016 and 2017, where we received basically around more than 650,000 refugees in Cox's Bazar. As you know, that this is, as you can imagine, this is quite a large or significant number. That means we need to accommodate them in a way that they have a place to live. And then basically government decided to basically locate them in the Cox's Bazar, where 26 square kilometer area has been basically prepared for them, which was once a vegetated area, that means forest. So that basically that area have been now sort of turned into a makeshift settlement for this huge number of refugees who are living there. It is a densely populated camps for sure. More than 1 million people are living there now. Around like 35,000 people are living per square kilometer. So it's hugely densely populated. And the shelters are fragile and also impermanent, of course. It is made up of bamboo and tarps. That means it cannot withstand a wind of more than 55 or 60 kilometers per hour. So it's a critical situation here. Government and also the humanitarian partners are leveraging basically the humanitarian services, basic services, with limited livelihood options, like no cash for work, no cash grant support, only cash for work is available there for the refugee people. UNHCR and IOM are the key agency here who are working with government, and there are 136 organizations who are supporting the 1 million people there. I also want to take the leverage to have a bit of a discussion on the key risk factors or key risk profile of the camp settlements and Cox's Bazar. As I mentioned, that it's cyclone prone, but it's also prone to landslide, flash flood, and also storm surge. Just to give you an overview on that, like since 2019, this camp has been basically experienced around 3,200 landslide or slope failure so far. 2,600 storm or wind incident, 6 cyclonic events, and also 330 flash floods events in the camp settlement. So it's a huge number in a way that people who basically doesn't know the language, people who doesn't know the context, like by them handling it, it's a tough. The largest fire that we have in camps is in March 2021, where around 10,100 shelters have been completely damaged there. That also left around 50,000 people without shelters in the camps. And humanitarian worker, ICG, Intersectoral Coordination Working Group, and then also RRC office, they like handled the situation, but it took months to rebuild those shelters again. Also, in the flash flood scenario in 2021, we also received a severe flash flood that sort of inundated around 30 camps, that also completely damaged around 11,000 shelters in the camp settlements. Just to mention that this overall humanitarian response has been supported by the resource mobilization drive called Joint Response Plan of the government and the Intersectoral Coordination Group, ISCG, with the support of organization. From the government side, the only sustainable thinking that they are processing is a sustainable repatriation of the 1 million refugees to the Myanmar. And that is the overall scenario risk profile of the camp settlements. Yeah. Apart from the traumatic event that they faced, they're still ongoing. Supports are there, but that supports are leveraged from the sectors, basically. They are not doing by themselves, apart from cash for work events. I think over to you, Evan.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciated hearing all that information. Now I'll turn to Razia to maybe share more around, obviously introduce yourself and share more around the challenges that you know of that Rohingya are facing in the camps and elsewhere, and how that's either impacted or compounded, caused by the extreme weather events that Sazzad also mentioned.
Thank you, Eva, and hello everyone. I am Razia Sultana. I'm a human rights activist and lawyer and founder of RWWS Society. It's based on Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh, and I'm honored to be speaking here. Thank you. Actually, my work are focusing especially for helping the women and girl from beginning, and I deal with victims women from in 2016 and 2017. And for their support, I create a psychosocial resilience program in Camp 14, and still continue this work. And I supporting most of the women in Camp 14, and also I have a women network who are helping me to give any information inside in the camp, especially in the fire. We know within the 5 years we see so many disaster, landslide and fire. So our women doing remarkable work, and they are the first responder, and especially because the Rohingya community is very conservative, and it is very necessary to someone will be there. It's not man, because men are not allowing to help any woman. So we keep in our mind, and I'm working with women, and I'm building my network all over the camp, and I appreciate our INGOs and our partners who are still supporting me for creating this kind of network, especially UN Women, Oxfam, and now we are collaborating with the CARE. I hope we will build more specific network among the women in whole camp. And one thing we know in rainy season, this is the 5 year now, and every year we seen the landslides, and because we know the shelter is it's not a shelter, is like only tarpaulin, and when it's rain and overload, and it's very easily washed, and in the lowland is they face the flood. So these people facing too many problems and difficulties, and in difficulty, they have also restricted movement and restricted some policies, so they cannot support each other from 2020, because the COVID was there, and there are so many so many order over there. So Rohingya inside in Canberra, their resource is now the limitation. I know this is very sensitive moment, and it is also this huge amount of Rohingya take shelter in Bangladesh is also a burden for Bangladesh, and Bangladesh also affected in climate disaster. And one of the 8 country, one of the is the Bangladesh, and Cox's Bazar now facing this kind of climate disaster we've seen because of the Rohingya issue, because already we banish a huge amount of the forest. So this is the thing we see, and this is a responsibility about the Rohingya issues. And also we have to focus on how can we overcome the situation. And for my small resource and limitation, we are trying to plantation, and we involve the women. And I believe the women can fight in the climate area. And this is not only the camp, in the whole world, the women can overcome the climate issue for plantation and other sanitation or hygiene. Because if we run some program like hygiene, sensitize and hygiene issue and awareness program, and support this kind of issue and involve the more women. And also not women, we have to also target the man, and we equally. But in Rohingya context, the women are always backside. So we need some special support for women so that we can grow awareness, so then we can prevent domestic violence. And there are so many sexual harassment, abusive in every camp. And every day we are getting the complaint about this kind of issue. So we have to careful and concentrate in this issue. And another issue is security. We have to focus on security, especially the women, and site management. And this is security about not only for the people, also security about the health issue. We're facing the health issue, and there are some treatment what is not available inside the camp. Maybe some camp have, but other camp people cannot move over there. They cannot get this, especially hepatitis C and B. Then we can say is I think escape is there. We can say is a jaundice. I think Sazzad bhai, this is a jaundice water disease. Is very common in camp, and I'm dealing with this problem. This disease is from 2010. It's not only camp. I mean, aside from Arakan, people are coming with this disease, hepatitis C and B, because it's the water disease, and they don't have the awareness about the clear water. So easily they affected in this disease, and end up this disease become liver cirrhosis and liver disease. And one thing I can say, education is very limited in the camp, and focus on this is also. Without education, we cannot civilize this community, because criminal activity is already we've seen, and it is a clear vision. And we have to be focused for educational program, involve every sector people. And there are also civil society inside in the camp. We have to involve them also in educational educational system. And repatriation issue is main important, but before repatriation, we have to aware how can we solve the running situation inside the Myanmar. So international community should focus on this issue. So this is the all over situation in camp or inside in Rakhine State. So thank you for my concern.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, and thank you to everyone. As you were all talking, I was kind of taking notes because I'm obsessive about taking notes, but just thinking about, excuse me, some of what you brought up about displaced people that actually, are bigger issues in other places, and just kind of the wider considerations, and, talking about limited movement, lack of freedom of movement, Really interesting thinking about shelter and infrastructure, and the fact that in Bangladesh, but in so many countries, there's such short-term infrastructure that's provided, either because host governments don't want to provide something longer term, or for other reasons. But we know that displacement isn't short-term in general, right? And so thinking about the housing, the shelter considerations, but then the conditions and what ends up happening with these shelters being such a huge issue. I think too, Razia, you spoke a lot about kind of, I really actually don't like this phrase, but kind of special populations, but thinking about who in particular might we need to be thinking about. I mean, really interesting thinking about women and how to offer the right sort of support to women. And so those being considerations for anticipatory action interventions, right? That things might not be successful if the wrong people are approaching certain populations as well. And I also wanted to loop back, Susan, to kind of how you started us off about localization and agency as well, and thinking about populations that often maybe in camps, kind of in some ways have limited agency, but the, crucial necessity of trusting that people know what their needs are and what their capacities are, and, deserve to be informed and so on. So a lot of really important issues raised. So I think it'd be great to sort of move into more of the, I don't know if we want to call it action, but in terms of just learning more about what is happening. And Sazzad, could you kick us off in terms of what your work, other related work around anticipatory action that you're part of for the camps?
Thank you again, Evans. Yes, a bit of a glimpse I can provide what is going on the anticipatory action and also early warning. So we are talking about 1 million people basically, and we know the context is vulnerable to cyclone, and Bangladesh is historically is quite renowned in terms of cyclone preparedness through the program called Cyclone Preparedness Program. It's a joint program of the Bangladesh Red Crescent Society and the Bangladesh government since 1972, where IFRC and the partners provided sort of significant support to roll this out across all 13 coastal belts. That 13 coastal belts also incorporates the Cox's Bazar. So once the influx happened, and then basically the first thing on the disaster risk management perspective has came to our IFRC Bangladesh Red Crescent and partners mind is that how we can sort of make 1 million people aware what is happening on the cyclone. If cyclone approach to southeast coast, what they will do, how they will do, where they will go. So this is the basic questions that we raised, and with the support from the Ministry of Disaster Management and Relief and the local RRRC office, and with the support from ISCG, we basically expanded the National Cyclone Early Warning System into the camp settlements in 2018, beginning of 2018. That means we envisioned to have a sort of a cyclone warning system to be in place, of course, run by the local people, that means Rohingya people, not by Bangladeshi. So what we did, we basically started creating volunteers with the site management agency, who is basically IOM and UNHCR and their partners. So we have been able to sort of train 100 volunteers per camps on the cyclone early warning, early action. That also triggers a bit of an anticipatory action after a cyclone, a certain signal. So that is happened. We covered all through the camps. That also entails the flag system, because CPP has a flag system. So there are 10 signal, 1 to 10, 1 to 3. There is no flag. There's a preparation stage. Signal 1, signal 4 goes off. Then you put 1 signal, 1 flag, 1 red flag, and then for 5 to 7 is flag number 2, and then 8, 9, 10 is flag number 3. That means it's a great danger. It is hitting. It is hitting. So this is a national early warning. This is a national flag system based on the Bangladesh Meteorological Department. So that system has been replicated to camps, and volunteers are being trained on cyclone early warning and a bit of a key preparedness or anticipatory action there. That means there are 3,300 volunteers exist in all 33 camps. That means 100 per camps, who are able to hoist the flag in time and also sort of provide anticipatory action messages to the camps based on the protocol. So that means volunteers are being mobilized by the agency that are assigned in the camps, and Red Cross, Red Crescent, and CVP, the program, is backing them up in terms of disseminating the signal from the Bangladesh Meteorological Department. Here, as I mentioned, that these people are from outside, so they don't know the local language, they don't know the local context. That means these communities with communication with communities working group and Translation Without Borders, they came into being, and they played an amazing job in terms of sort of jointly with RRC office, ISCG, and Red Cross Red Crescent. We developed a field discussion guide for the volunteers who will be trained and disseminate key early warning and anticipatory messages into the camps. So that is mainly family level preparedness and community level preparedness that we are talking about, and also flag. So flag is a visible tool that people can see it and they can prepare accordingly with the volunteer support. So that is happening in the camps now, and it's getting better and better. There are 6 sort of cyclonic events that we faced in the camps, and every time since 2019, we have been able to raise the flag there, and certain level of anticipatory action messages has been sort of disseminated into the camp settlements. So regarding, as you know, there are 136 agencies working in all 33 camps. That means there is a system in place through the sector, so the sector can also activate their own plan regarding tightening down the shelter with the shelter kits, then sort of a relocation of EVIs, extremely vulnerable populations, to a safer location. Even the safer location in camps is not appropriate because there is no cyclone shelter exist in the camps. But still, there are a few places. It's maybe a bit of a safer and stronger than the usual shelters made up of tarpaulin and bamboo. They have been relocated to the places. So that is the sectoral intervention that is happening through ISCG, intersectoral coordination group. So it's happening in the camps. Once COVID hit in 2020, that became a dual threat for us in terms of sort of cyclone preparedness. As it's a new thing, the whole globe doesn't know what to do on the COVID-19. And once it kicked off in March 2020 in Bangladesh, the CPP, Red Cross, Red Crescent, ISCG, RRC set together to see what we can do in the cyclone seasons, because there are 2 cyclone seasons in the country. One is April and May, and another one is October and November. So we decided not to do dissemination again until this is flag number 1. That means we reduce the dissemination, rather basically prioritizing the COVID messaging and awareness at the first, because there was at the very beginning of the COVID-19 that create a lot of panic in the camps as well, because there are, as Razia rightly mentioned, there are inadequate number of hospitals, like healthcare centers. So if we do sort of again messaging on cyclone which might come, then it will create extra panic to the people, and we didn't want to do it. So we reduced the amount of messaging, number of days, and as well. So that is the way that we also developed a communication protocol as well to harmonize all the 136 agencies who are working together, because the volunteers belongs to them. They usually mobilize the volunteers under our support for the cyclone preparedness. So that is the way that we manage the early warning and early action or anticipatory action in the camp, in the camp settlements. Whenever it comes to landslide or like heavy rainfall, that creates landslide and flash flood. As you know, flash flood is camps are vulnerable to flash floods. So whenever it comes to that part, we also sort of banking on the synoptic report that is produced by Anticipatory Working Group, which is headed by Red Cross, Red Crescent, CPP, Bangladesh Meteorological Department. They usually produce some of the documents for cyclone, mentioning its track, where it's going, where it's hitting, what kind of preparedness actions can be taken. So once they fired the report to us, we also shared with the wider external community, including ISCG, to trigger their mechanism to prepare the sectors to disseminate further messaging. That also includes the preparation of the mobile medical teams, then community volunteers, emergency preparedness and response team on the ground, so that they can be mobilized if really cyclone hits. For landslide, as you know, there is no warning system so far. What we do now is there is some UNDP is working with RIMES, the Regional Integrated Multi-Hazard Warning System. So they are working with the RIMES to produce a sort of a localized early warning, not in a sense that early warning, but it's a rainfall trigger, so that alert system goes off if it's heavily rain. There is heavy rainfall for the upcoming 5 days. So we have 5 days rainfall sort of alert system to be mobilized and to be shared with the external actors to make them prepared in a way that they can sort of prepare the camp settlements in a way that some level of anticipatory action can goes off. Here again, we want to mention that the sectors is also playing a critical role here because there are shelter, there are wash, there are health. So anticipatory action also belongs to them. On top of that, what communications communities working group does, they produce key messages for the preparedness actions. So that can reach out to the community so that they can take preparation based on that. But in a nutshell, in the camps so far, for cyclone, we haven't widely agreed and well-established early warning mechanism that is in place with the volunteers. That means localized early warning is there. Anticipatory action messagings are happening, and shelters from ICG, they are working together with the government to provide support to the volunteers. But for landslide, for other hazards, there is no early warning system established in the camps. But there are some working in progress as well. Over to you, Evans. Sorry for taking a bit of a time on that.
Thank you so much. No, and just breaking down by hazard, really, really interesting. And you know, you said people aren't aware of the, you know, the culture, the context. And one of the people I interviewed who'd been working in Bangladesh as a humanitarian said, you know, you have to understand people aren't aware of the topography, right? So realizing kind of another aspect of being displaced means going somewhere potentially really, really new and not knowing those warning signs of the land that we might, you know, otherwise have known, which I think is really important. Susan, can I turn it over to you kind of in reflection to what Sazzad said in terms of maybe what you've seen or anything you want to share in relation to kind of your own research around some of these early warnings and other aspects of this?
Yeah, thanks for the input, Sazzad. It makes me think about some of the findings from my research, drawing our attention to some constraints, factors that could inhibit people's ability to be able to receive this assistance or these early warning systems, be able to identify them. One of it is trust. So, for example, in terms of like government-led relocation, for example, my study found that a lot of people were skeptical about who's leading these efforts. So based on prior experiences, they may decide not to, accept that assistance if there's lack of trust. So how are we, putting that in mind in terms of like who's making these interventions? What are the existing trust, factors within the populations that we're dealing with? Another thing is factors that could keep people trapped. So we're thinking about things like legal and structural limitations. One example that comes up, which is quite interesting, is how political rhetoric can keep people trapped. So if people feel like, oh, okay, that moving people to a different place, the narrative is that outsiders are not welcome, people rather stay in places of risk than make that movement, take that action to move. So thinking about how some of these factors could limit people. Another thing is, access to these information on early warning, risk communication, risk assessment. So is the information available to people? Do people know where it's safe? Do people have adequate information on where to move to? So how is that information being passed across? And is it getting to everybody, especially the most vulnerable people? How is this process being done? One thing that I can highlight from my study is the use of WhatsApp messaging, for example. People have existing community groups where they share messages about like events, about solutions to problems. So this is an avenue that can be explored in terms of just communicating about, assistance, providing early warning, being able to find out what's already existing within these communities, and to be able to leverage from those, being able to ensure that people are well protected.
Yeah.
So over to you.
Razia, do you have kind of thoughts? Does that resonate with some of kind of what you found in your work, or what else should we be considering for displaced people in terms of some of what Susan talked about or other things?
One thing, this community is now is a situation. They are neither for in Bangladesh, neither for in their own country, and they don't have any resource, or they don't have it's a limited, but at least they cannot running their life as a normal people. And this issue, people are now and part of in some criminal activity like drug dealing, trafficking, and is really harmful for the adolescent. And we have so many problems, but we totally ignore our adolescent boys or girls who are under threat. Because they don't have any school or any center for share their own situation. And if anything happened, they are the first, victim, especially for in the female issue. When a grown-up girl, she cannot move around in the camp. And if she go outside, and she face so many problems, is abuse or from community level. So, and even if any girls want to be joined with any volunteer work with the joining the center, especially I have the experience. They are not allowing the girls to come in the center, and they thought this is against of the religious, against of the society. So we have to concentrate in this issue, and we need more awareness that the woman female girls should be in the process, and they should learn many things, because they are the one who are controlling the society, only not the man, only not the community head who is only the male. We need a female head also who can take the decision. So the decision making process we have to grow up. And for myself, because my organization is a women-led organization, and I am doing with the women, and my all volunteer, even my staff are women. So I create network within the women, and I also brainstorming session doing with the males. So I give them understanding that the female is part of society. It's not, they are not the slave. They are half. They're the society half, because this Rohingya community is illiterate, and because of the situation, and they have very false religious information. They don't have the real knowledge about the religion, about the Islam. So they use this religion against the woman. Anything happen, even in the COVID issue, they blame the woman. Even when anything happen, everything goes to the woman. If anything happen in the camp, goes to the woman, and they bring the religious issue. So in this issue, we can make some program also involve the community stakeholder, community level people, and make them understand that religion never forbidden the woman work. Women should become front, and women can lead. So this is my ambitious also. And for me, if we do like this, I think the domestic violence and abuse will be increased. Also, child marriage and trafficking issue. This is also happened because women, they cannot raise their voice. Those who have voice, and they're always under threat. So we need to be concentrating this issue and make sure that they can be secure. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that there's questions in the chat. Razia, maybe you could quickly speak to a question asking about kind of tensions between refugees and the host communities. So,
Yes.
Is there a potential source of conflict between local people and displaced people in Bangladesh and other countries? And then if we're thinking really through this lens of, a cyclone or a mudslide, kind of how does that impact it, or what are the outcomes of it? In 2 minutes or less.
No. When I start my psychosocial, first time I include the 30% host community, because my center is surrounded with the host community. I feel it, if host community will not allow, we cannot run any program. And the first host community woman told, when I asked her, what are you doing and what is your husband's job? And she blamed me that my husband lost my job because of Rohingya. So this is a simple issue, and she grew ahead against the Rohingya. And I grow a relation development program and social cohesion. And this is where my experience, I see we are not involving host community in every program. We have to include the host community and make them understand that these people are vulnerable. They have also right, and they have to understand their situation, because some rumor easily they easily believe that it's happened for it's happened only for the Rohingya. So some sort of rumor is make conflict between two community. And we are not doing anything for remove this, and we are not even we're preventing host community and Rohingya community not to sit together also, but we have to remove this kind of issue. If they are know each other and they share each other problem, maybe they can grow relation development and conflict. It is not the 100%, but at least 50% can remove. And Bangladesh is a very small country, and Cox's Bazar is also a dense area, and these people, the Rohingya people, and they're making the disaster about the climate also, because also the forest is damaged and climate is changing, and host community or whole Bangladesh blaming the Rohingya. These people are creating the problem, and they are doing unusual thing. But we have to give real information, and we have to prevent the rumor, and we have to control the media also, because sometimes some rumor affected too much between these two community, and can happen anything, and we cannot control. So this is both community responsibility to prevent this kind of issue. Thank you. I think you understand what I mean.
No, really well put, and that links to some of what Susan talked about trust. And interesting that the other side of trust is mistrust, right? And the kind of political situation that Susan talked about as well.
Even last time when I created a social cohesion meeting in one UN Women program, and the host community women are expressed there that we didn't know that this woman can be raise their voice, and they understand each other. They meet few women, and totally they shocked that the Rohingya women can speak, and they appreciate their work. So we have to communicate, and we have to give a platform to share each other experience, so that they learn from each other. And both have their own experience in their own area. Rohingya also have experience, and host community also have experience. Both have resource. Rohingya have some limitation, but host community has full of resource. But full of resource, host community cannot use of lack of information. But within limitation, Rohingya community overcomes so many things. So they can teach each other, they can share. So this is the thing about the social. We need the social cohesion program and project, and we can grow the relation development with both community. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, and I think it speaks to, what we know in terms of refugees and displaced people, right? That the situation has to do with a broader context, right? And that often is, a lot of xenophobia or restrictive host country policies and so on. There's some very, very interesting questions in the chat. I'm going out of order, but I'm wondering if, Susan, if you wanted to address the interesting question around cities, and this kind of links potentially to social cohesion as well, but Karen asked, could anyone address issues related to displaced people living in cities? And Karen, if you have ideas, you can jump in afterwards. Yeah, do you have thoughts on that? I don't know if your research is focused on that.
Yeah, so my research, interestingly, is focused on cities, especially looking at climate change as a driver. Because what we're seeing in many cities is that, once people's livelihoods are impacted in rural areas, they're attracted to cities. And sometimes the cities are coastal cities that are equally vulnerable to climate change. And so what happens when all these people that have moved here, not only due to climate change as a driver, but also in search for economic opportunity. So in the present research that we're conducting now in West Africa, what we're seeing is that there is an increasing attention or interest in looking at displaced people in cities driven by climate change specifically. And the thing that I'm seeing from the research so far is that, cities leadership is limited by resources. They don't have as much resources to be able to address this issue. First of all, it's difficult to say, so not being able to identify people's needs specifically makes it more complicated. And then also not having the adequate resources, although partnerships have been really helpful. This is where donors, external funders, and even funding from national governments have been helpful for cities to be able to think about programs to support people who have migrated or are displaced due to climate change in cities. So one example is in Ghana. So Ghana just got, Accra specifically, just got a grant to be able to integrate migrants who are involved in informal waste picking to be engaged, in waste management within the city. So that's an opportunity to be able to provide livelihood opportunities, but also to address some of the climate vulnerabilities within these places where migrants are situated, because oftentimes they're found in slum settlements. And so being able to integrate not only climate change programming, climate change adaptation programs, but also to think about issues of displacement and migration in the same lens has been helpful, but it's still in its initial stage. Like most of these programs haven't developed fully, and so there's room for more more funding and more thinking about these issues.
Great, thank you. Karen, who's one of our audience members, I don't know if you have any, but an expert on urban forced migration. Do you have any thoughts in relation to this? I think in some ways you're maybe newer to anticipatory action, but you're also doing or planning some research related to flooding.
Yeah, hi everybody, it's great to be here. Sorry for being off camera and for my voice. I'm fascinated by this wonderful conversation and discussion. A couple of things on cities. One is we're doing some work on not just coastal, because actually it's inland cities are equally subject to, excuse me, the problems of climate change impact, including flooding. And so we've been looking at some cities in Africa, including Kampala and Addis. And what we're seeing there when we go into informal settlements in poor areas of these cities, which, as everybody knows, are the majority of areas in cities, and also the areas where migrants and refugees go. What we're seeing in these cities is that the problems of climate change impact are affecting these cities as are the problems of increased in migration. But what's interesting to us is that actually the problems are aggravated by actions that the cities don't do, that city municipalities don't do. So for example, one of the main problems we're seeing in informal settlements is that plastic pollution and other kinds of environmental degradation are creating major problems that aggravate flooding. So plastics are clogging whatever existing sewage systems there are in informal settlements. Often these are very basic. And of course, the city governments don't care about these areas. So in terms of anticipatory action, to me, one thing that we should all consider is that the plastics treaty that is being processed now and is coming down the track for everybody, and in which probably donors have a lot of interest, because plastics, everyone is very seized with the issue of plastics, not only in water and ocean plastic pollution, but also plastic pollution in land. And it seems to me that we could all seize this opportunity and push for this plastics treaty a lot, because resources could be coming after it, not just resources from governments and donors, but also from the worst culprits, those who are to blame for plastics, which are, of course, large corporations and the fossil fuel industry. So I just think we should, in terms of anticipatory action, think about what is coming down the track, including increased movement into cities and increased problems with inland and coastal cities, but also what resources might become available that we can all advocate for and push for. Thanks so much. Bye.
Great, thank you. We definitely don't have time to go into this, but I would say some of what Karen was talking about, really made me think about something, I don't know if it's attention, but around anticipatory action and development. And some of my research right now is in South Sudan and looking at the flooding that's happening, reaching IDP camps. And some of the people I'm interviewing who live there say, sometimes these floods are happening because the Nile, it's full of sediment. And actually there's a development project here that, yes, anticipatory action, yes, helping people in advance of the flooding. And there's so much more to do that would mitigate the flooding in the first place. So there's another community conversation for us. But I'm very aware that Sazzad has a few questions in the chat for him. And I'm wondering, Sazzad, if you want to briefly address those, and then anyone else, if you want to address the questions.
Thank you, Evans. I think the first question is about a durable solution for the camps. Actually, durability in the camp settlements has remained still a contested paradigm, in a way that the authorities are still thinking of a sustainable repatriation to the Myanmar, and there is discussion between Bangladesh and Myanmar is ongoing with the support from the UN and other sort of advocates. But regarding the aspect that structures that are sort of not the permanent shelters. Only the one building, I think, where the government officials are sitting down is we call CIC, Camp in Charge Office. That is the concrete structure that can withstand like winds, strong winds or storms, but others are still vulnerable. In terms of landslide and in terms of sort of flash flood aspect, the site management agency, who are basically the coordinating body in each camp, they are doing sort of an assessment which can sort of identify the areas vulnerable to landslide and the areas which can be inundated due to the first flood. So they are identifying the areas and associated sort of shelters who are there. And that also means that sort of, if necessary, they can relocate those number of families to a place where a bit of safer compared to those vulnerable sort of steep slope hilly areas. That is still going on, but it's still happening in the camps, as I also mentioned in my presentation for landslide and flash flood. But still, the site management agency, who are the sort of owner to do it in consultation with the actors, with the government as well. Regarding concrete structure, the shelters still remain with bamboo and tarpaulin. There are several advocacies going on for sure, also from UN and also from Red Cross, Red Crescent to the government, that whether we can be an improved shelter with the semi-permanent one. So that has been happened, and I think it's a continuous effort is going on, advocacy is going on to the government, but still we have so far what we have in the camps is still the access to the non-permanent shelters in the camps. For the evacuation, I think that is still a great concern, and a concern of panic as well. Whatever it landslides, cyclone and other hazards is sort of vulnerable, become sort of prominent in camps, even though signal flags are there. If you don't have a location to identify and advise them to go, then what vulnerable people can think of, basically. So this is the continuous struggle that we have whenever a cyclone signal raise or a storm alert raise or even landslide is there. Government still doesn't have any plan to construct the cyclone shelters in the areas. There are shelters in the host communities, but as Razia also mentioned, the cohesive environment is still need to be created between camp and host. Government has sort of advised organizations to allocate 25% of the resources for the host community so that they can be favorable to the emergency response for the Rohingyas. That means some sort of an actions is going on, but it's still at the sort of in a way that it's not that materialized in terms of sitting together and discuss together on the common problem. No, this is not happening so far. However, that also means that evacuation is not possible. We are even not sort of mentioning the word evacuation in the camp settlement. So we are advising them that only EVIs, extremely vulnerable individuals who are at risk, can be relocated to a safer location compared to their shelter. And we are also saying that your shelter is the safest place for you, so that you know your place, you know your family together, hold on tight. If something really bad happen, then basically there would be a chance to relocate them to some of the shelter, they call it communal shelter, like learning space, women friendly space, child friendly space. Those are a bit of a stronger compared to the shelters of the individual families in the camp. So those are still there, events, but they are not the evacuation centers at all. Advocacy is going on, but we don't know when basically that would be materialized in the camp settlements. I think those are the two questions, Evans, for me.
Yeah, thank you. So in our wrap up, I'm wondering if each of you conversationalists could share just maybe one sentence. So I'm going to keep you, we have 60 seconds. In terms of this intersection, refugees, displaced people, anticipatory action, what's one thing you want people to keep in mind in terms of making this work better for people or making this happen for people? And I would say mine is going off of what Sazzad just said, that you don't even mention evacuation, just remembering the limitations of rights that so many forcibly displaced people have. Susan, over to you.
Yeah, for me, I just want to reiterate agency, respecting people's agency to be able to determine what the course of action is for themselves is important.
Thank you. Sazzad, one sentence.
Evans, there is a system established in the camps. We need to strengthen that. We need to remind that this is the different context that we are talking about, not the usual community. So whatever we have, we need to strengthen that rather than creating a system that does take another 5 years to familiarize those. So keep trusting on the existing system, build on the system, create trust at the community level so that the anticipatory reaction and early warning can be strengthened to save lives and reduce damage.
Thank you. Razia, last word in one sentence.
This, as Sazzad Ansari told, we need the strength to take this vulnerable community as a human being and don't think they will live here forever. They have to go, and we all together have to work on this.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. I know we're just past the hour. I wish you all a wonderful day and yeah, hope to stay in touch. Feel free to be in touch with any of us and we'll continue the conversation. Enjoy the rest of your days. And thank you so much to our wonderful panelists / conversationalists.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.